Every single government, every massive institution, and every market eventually learns the exact same very hard lesson. And that is, the harder you try to squeeze and control people, the faster reality just sort of slips right through your fingers. Welcome to this explainer. Today we're going completely under the hood of human behavior. We aren't just reacting to the news or looking at market charts, we're actually reverse engineering the visible chaos happening all around us to find the hidden mathematical rules, basically the source code that governs how we actually behave. Okay, let's dive right into this. You ever look around and just wonder why highly intelligent people, incredibly powerful governments, and these massive institutions repeatedly act against their own best interests? I mean, why do incentives almost always end up overpowering their stated intentions? We see this happen constantly, right? And yet, we treat each instance as if it's some unique, isolated failure. But what if it isn't random at all? As we go through this explainer, I want you to constantly keep asking yourself one question. What invisible force produces this visible outcome? Let's start with the classic macro pattern. You have a state intention, right? A government decides, hey, we're banning VPNs to restrict digital access, or they try to heavily regulate crypto. Well, what's the immediate, equal, and opposite behavioral response from the public? VPN usage absolutely explodes, torrenting thrives, and those crypto bans literally just strengthen the push for self-custody. The very attempt to suppress a behavior mathematically increase the demand for that exact behavior. This really highlights the limits of massive, complex systems. There's this fascinating observation from Zero Hedge pointing out that you can have a city like New York, which is heavily surveilled, highly controlled, and can slap you with a fine for running a red light in a matter of seconds, and yet that very same complex dragnet entirely fails to catch a high-profile target like a contract killer for hours. It neutrally illustrates this wild phenomenon where aggressive, hyper-complex surveillance systems often fail entirely at their core objectives simply because complexity defeats control. We call this the illusion of control. And the absolute crucial point to grasp here is that these macro failures are not political anomalies. They're not just flukes, and it's not just basic incompetence. They are highly predictable symptoms of a systemic law of human behavior. When a system attempts to just brute force a rigid outcome, it actually becomes incredibly brittle. And we see this pop up in economics too. Consider this recent observation from Jason regarding union negotiations where a union leader basically threatened to shut down vital supply chains unless they secured a 77% wage increase. Now, looking at this impartially, it's a prime example of an aggressive attempt to force an outcome. But the second-order consequence of that kind of overreach, it simply accelerates the industry's dependency on alternative solutions like automation. The harder you squeeze, the more the system just naturally routes right around you.
Okay, Section 1, the market laboratory, human intent versus execution.
To really understand this pattern on a micro level, we can look at an autonomous system called Scana, not as a product, but as a real-time behavioral laboratory. The data we've seen from millions of financial decisions proved a pretty incredible fundamental thesis. The average person is actually not bad at investing. They are just terrible at execution. Because the market is not the story here, the human is the story. Literally every chart you look at is just the visible residue of a completely predictable human emotional cycle. It's like a predictable psychological loop, mapped out perfectly by the laboratory data. A trader's intention is, obviously, to make money. They hit a winning streak. Boom, that's the emotional trigger. Suddenly, this massive overconfidence picks in. They manually interfere with the system, they double their leverage, and the consequence? A margin call. Then, on the flip side, their intention shifts to protecting capital. They take a minor market loss, fear triggers them to manually jump in and move their stop loss closer, and that results in death by 1,000 small exits. Emotion just entirely overrides the objective plan. Now you might be wondering, just how bad is this manual emotional interference? Well, Scana's internal data revealed a genuinely staggering statistic, 71%. 71% of users who manually intervened and interfered with already profitable trades actually reduced their overall returns. Let that sink in for a second. Their desperate need to control the outcome was the exact thing that destroyed it.
A massive 71% of users suffered reduced returns caused entirely by their own human intervention. Only 18% managed to actually improve things. Human execution, which is driven by stress, fatigue, and that stubborn illusion of control, almost always degrades the mathematical advantage. The very second humans try to manually force a win out of fear or greed, they sabotage themselves, every single time. So, synthesizing the macro politics we started with and combining it with the micro trading data we just saw, we arrive at this explicit, completely undeniable law of reality. Law number 001.
control creates resistance. Attempts to suppress, micromanage, or force a behavior mathematically increase the demand for the exact opposite outcome. Because you see, the pattern repeats everywhere. It is identical across the board. VPN bans create VPN demand. Regulating crypto heavily just drives users right into decentralized self-custody. Union overreach simply accelerates the corporate drive for robotics and automation. And right there in the market, winning streaks cause an illusion of control that leads to reckless trading and completely wiped out accounts. Every system that relies too heavily on rigid control eventually, inevitably, produces its own opposition.
Which brings us to Section 2. Success creates fragility. The cost of winning.
There's this twin law to the source code, which is that the very act of winning, whether you're a trader on a hot streak or a massive institution that has dominated the globe for decades, makes you dangerously vulnerable to your own hubris. You stop relying on your systems, and you start actually believing in your own infallibility. There's this incredibly dry, sardonic quote from the Escayana AI entity itself that I love. Most investors are just sophisticated gamblers playing musical chairs with each other's delusions. It just perfectly hits the nail on the head regarding the sheer irrationality that infects markets during euphoric rallies. Success literally blinds people to the reality that they are just reacting to a cycle they don't actually understand.
So what happens next? Section 3, the shift in trust.
Let's look at the second-order consequences of all this. If human execution is fatally flawed by emotion, if human bureaucracies naturally create resistance, and if human success inevitably breeds fragility, where does the trust go? When old systems break down, trust doesn't just evaporate, it migrates, and we're seeing this migration happen in real time. Take this observation noting the Department of Government Efficiency finding massive bureaucratic waste. Impartially speaking, this represents a huge societal shift. As trust in traditional, painfully slow, human-run bureaucratic systems collapses, public faith and capital shift rapidly toward the promise of algorithmic efficiency and systemic transparency. The future really relies on delegating our judgment to systems that just don't feel fear or greed or that desperate, clinging need to over-control everything. Trust is aggressively shifting away from legacy institutions and moving directly toward individual sovereignty powered by autonomous systems. People just want the outcomes, but without all the friction of human ego getting in the way. And honestly, this completely reframes how we need to look at AI. AI is not just some cute chatbot. It's not just a tool to help you write emails faster. In environments where decisions actually matter, AI is becoming an external layer of judgment. It acts as a fortress against human fragility. A weak operator with AI is, well, still weak, but a strong operator uses AI to completely preserve their highest quality judgment, effectively removing their own emotional interference from the equation entirely. Think about how a fortress like that is built. If we look at the Scana Sovereign Desk architecture as our model, it operates on this brilliant closed learning loop. Step 1. Trade execution. This is handled entirely by the system, not the emotional human. Step 2. The historian reviews the outcome completely impartially, like, did we move the stop too early? Step 3. It creates a structured outcome based on that data. And finally, Step 4. Scout retrieval uses that exact experience to inform the very next decision. The AI retains the experience and permanently corrects flaws without a single drop of human emotional panic.
That is the ultimate difference right there. Human execution, it's inherently chaotic. It's totally subject to fear, fatigue, stress, and ego. And worst of all, it forgets its lessons. System execution, on the other hand, maintains calm, unbroken continuity. It preserves judgment when you're asleep, when you're traveling, or when you're panicking. It remembers absolutely every mistake, and it never, ever makes the same one twice. It is literally the ultimate antidote to the illusion of control.
So we've seen how control creates resistance. We've seen how success breeds fragility, and exactly why trust is currently migrating toward autonomous, emotionless systems. The patterns are literally everywhere once you know what you're looking for. So I want to leave you with a provocative question to take away from this explainer today. If reality has a source code, are you reading it, or are you just reacting to it?
Because once you see these underlying systems, you just can't unsee them. You stop being a victim of the chaos, and you finally start understanding the rules of the game. Reality has a source code. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I highly recommend you look a little closer at the systems around you this week. You might be surprised by what you find.